Michael Viewmaster Morlan here, and welcome to Galactic Inquiry. Coming up, part 2 of our interview with Richard Garriott, this time in space. India sends a probe to Mars, cosplay costumes, keyrings, and more, coming up right after this. Hey, welcome to Galactic Inquiry, the weekly webcast where we feature you, the community star citizens. And a big welcome to our newest Patreons, Paul Glenn, Tabaskoid, Stephen Strong, and Theodore Briggs. We're so glad you could be a part of the show each week. Now, there's a lot of great news to share, but first, I've come to realize many citizens don't know I no longer work at Cloud Imperium Games. That's right. I was released from CIG after producing 72 episodes of Wingman's Hangar. And here's something nobody knows. I turned down my severance package because the severance contract included a gag order. Yeah. If I'd signed it, I would have to worry every time we published a new show whether something I said was, and I quote, disparaging of the company's officers, directors, employees, shareholders, or agents. So if I'd signed this, we wouldn't be able to bring you interesting debates like those we feature in Go, No Go. We wouldn't be able to question whether Chris Roberts and the Cloud Imperium Games is on the right course to creating the best damn space game ever. So, Galactic Inquiry depends on you to be a free voice in the verse. So please, support us by taking a moment to click on that Patreon logo right there and pledge $1 or more. Remember, your pledge is a pledge for freedom. So anyway, speaking of pledges, CIG now has over 600,000 citizens in its roll call and broke 64 million this last week. And a new stretch goal is realized, more detailed AI activities. 10 distinct types of AI character roles on planet-side environments, including, amongst others, a Vandal warrior for when you're itching to start a fight, and a bartender when you got to knock back one for after you got your ass kicked by a Vandal. And in a display of the power of Star citizenry, Lego builder Nosmigon did such a great job with his concept build of a Lego Hornet that 10,000 supporters chimed in on the Lego site. So Nosmigon's concept now moves forward to the official Lego review stage in January. So congratulations to you for that. Earlier this year, music composer Wunderkind, George Oldziey, successfully funded his Wing Commander music orchestral recording project. Now, that recording is slated for late October in Bratislava, but if you just can't wait for that, this weekend you could hop on over to Austin, Texas, where George's Wing Commander Suite is being performed by the Austin Civic Orchestra. Details and tickets for the concert scheduled this Sunday at 3 p.m. may be found on the Austin Civic Orchestra website. Now, Carla and I will be there. We hope to see you there too. Finally, Star citizens gathered for their second Austin Bar Citizen at the Flying Saucer Pub. I actually made it to the meetup this time, and oh, who is that? That's right. Eric Wingman Peterson found time to drop in and hang out with. Also, Citizen Gorath shared his special 2940 Idris Dreams Cabernet. It was a great time to mix it up with a few of our fellow citizens. And remember, if you have a Bar Citizen meetup, send us the video evidence and we'll feature you on the show. Later in the show, Richard Garriott de Caillot joins us to talk about games and space. But now, here's the word of the week.
Word of the week.
The word of the week is nanosat. Normally, we here at Word of the Week headquarters are in favor of any space trends that come our way because, well, we're space sluts. But the advent of nanosats has us taken a cold, hard look at our relationship with outer space. Nanosats are tiny satellites weighing only a few kilograms that can be built for mere tens of thousands of dollars. They are the canoe of the space ocean, if you will. And in the next 5 years, over 1,000 of them will be launched. Now, if you want to know exactly what they can do, well, let's build one right now. You'll need a smartphone, some duct tape. You know, I'll tell you what. Just slip this phone into Richard Garriott's pocket for his next space mission and ask him to drop it off on the way up. Be sure he turns it on. Now, once in orbit, your phone, nanosat, is now equipped to take selfies and text message endless arguments with its boyfriend. And it can also play Bob Marley. Even more importantly, nanosats are a dual-use technology because they can also be used for military purposes. But hey, don't worry. The Obama administration has repealed the law that required all satellites to be licensed by the State Department as munitions. Your nanosats are free to be, baby. Well, whatever you and the private owners of rocket ships would like them to be, we just hope General Garriott keeps those game virtues he loves so much. And now, here's the news. India made history on Wednesday, beating Japan and China to become the first Asian nation to orbit a satellite around Mars. With a shoestring budget of only $74 million, the little engine that could depended on the reuse of existing technologies and a smaller rocket to boost the satellite into space and onto its destination. Now, space law experts note that India's success could spark new debate on how countries set rules governing resources in outer space. India has signed but not ratified the so-called Moon Treaty, which governs the exploitation of resources on the Moon and other planets, and thus begins another space race. Now, for decades, many have denied Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and many others who followed actually walked on the Moon.
The fact that the landing was actually done in a television studio.
And there was the big black background with, like, fake stars and stuff.
It's the flag being planted on the moon facing one way and the shadow of the man being the other way.
Over the years, scientists have responded with critical analysis of the photography from the moon's surface, showing how the hoaxers' views and opinions were pretty misguided. But the debate rages on. Not convinced by science, perhaps the hoaxers will pause to review the latest from NVIDIA. Using their Maxwell render technology, a real-time radiosity solution amongst other features, NVIDIA decided to tackle the harsh conditions of the moon's surface. NVIDIA's Mark Daly and Lucas Magder recreated the scene of Aldrin's descent down the lander ladder as photographed by Armstrong. Now, hoaxers have long disputed the reality of the landing because Aldrin is lit quite brilliantly in the deep shadow of the lander. What Daly and Magder discovered was, while the moon's surface is only 7% reflective, essentially a very dark gray, and would be hard-pressed to illuminate shadows, Neil Armstrong's suit was a brilliant white. By itself, it was enough to reflect the sun's light into the shadows of the lander and make Aldrin's spacesuit stand out. In Star Citizen news, Nikki D'Angelo reports from the Elysium system where one Tavaran is making his bid for a Senate seat. Nikki?
Hello, Michael. Today's story is going to take us to Elysium 4, the former homeworld of the Tavaran Empire and formerly known as Gemma. Gemma was conquered during the First Tavaran War and soon after renamed to Elysium 4. At that point, no Tavarans were allowed to return to their homeworld. After the fall of the M.E.R.C regime, that policy was redacted, but still few Tavarans returned to their homeworld, and those that did fell into less than legal occupations. Today, one Tavaran, Suj Kasi, hopes to enact social change and rebuild the Tavaran culture that once was, all while assimilating back into the UEE and becoming upstanding citizens. This task might seem hard for some, but to a UEE Navy and Army veteran, it is far easier than the missions he's flown and the dangerous places he's fought the Vandal in the past.
Nikki, what kind of support do you think Kasi will get on Elysium 4?
Michael, this is something that we haven't seen to this point. Seats in the UEE Congress have been open to non-human races since the fall of the M.E.R.C regime. Still, few have pursued this, and it would be a first for the home world of the Tavarans.
Do we know anything about his opponent?
No, Michael, not at this point. It's still a little early for most to announce their candidacy, but whoever takes up the challenge to run against him is going to have tough competition. Kasi is a war hero and earned his citizenship the hard way. Most of the politicians are born into bureaucracy. Kasi is choosing it. Who knows, if Tavarans turn out in force on Elysium 4, you might just be looking at the next senator from the old Tavaran homeworld.
Thanks, Nikki. And that's your aerospace news. At Galactic Inquiry, we're always looking for your creations, and here's what we found on the web this week. First up, Rayzer has made this cool UEE Navy Captain cosplay uniform with the Squadron 42 logo on the back, braids and patches, but just a jacket does not a costume make. So, along with it, he sports some fine breeches, boots, belts, and a baseball cap. Wrapping up the ensemble, check out the recruitment posters he's created. Sporting a gruff look and a stogie, he's set up to be the cat's meow with the space gals. Next up, continuing the real-world Star Citizen theme, Starfire made this aluminum Anvil Aerospace keychain with his CNC machine. No cheap plastic for this guy. After filling in the gaps with paint and a final surface grind, he's produced a very nice keepsake. Looks like it's time for me to break out my Shapeco 2 CNC and cut my own key fob. For this week's org, let's take a look at M.E.R.C, Mercenary Economy, Recon, and Crafting. A diverse lot. Their community website comes in 3 flavors, German, English, and Spanish. Their tribute to Star Citizen video has a cool voiceover, very soothing, like, watching a movie trailer and eating popcorn. And their history includes sending vodka and cake to the CIG headquarters in Austin. Yeah, I remember that. Now, who wouldn't want to hang out with these guys? But best of all, they have links to all the past episodes of Galactic Inquiry. How could you not love these guys? Officially, this organization does not exist, except on the RSI org page. It has no ships, no home, other than the stars. They straddle the line between in-game and the metagame, collecting information in both domains. And we have no idea how much or how any of it's used. Sound familiar, America? Stating their primary objective to develop and maintain infrastructure to support espionage and independent spycraft as careers, the organization boasts a membership of, well, 49. But who knows how many there really are, who they're allied with. This org is most definitely on the shady side of shady. Yeah, and just like us, they're listening. Finally, Citizen Stu LOD has created a new website focused on tactics called, oddly enough, StarCitizenTactics.com. Now, although it's not completely filled out, it does have links to some existing tutorials on weapons loadouts, power and shield uses, missiles, and a video tutorial for Arena Commander version 0.9. There's also a live stream for Arena Commander. I'm sure he'd appreciate any tutorials you've made. So check it out and help him. Help us all learn what we need to know how to survive in the wilds of space. Thanks to Rayzer, Starfire, M.E.R.C, the organization, and Stu LOD. You're on this week's Fan Frequency. Here is the second of our two-part interview with Richard Garriott.
Okay, listen up. Here is our known mission. Richard Garriott is astronaut, and we have intelligence that he is perfect candidate to smuggle one of our men onto the International Space Station. This is our big chance to take over the ISS and establish it as a space base in war against the Morlans. Once on board, our superior powers will be recognized, and we will defeat the Morlans once and for all!
Beep beep!
Single sock will go.
What? I can't go.
Why not?
I don't have any reason.
That's what I thought.
Beep 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 beep.
I have thought of that. We will turn our Russian allies against the Americans on the space station, and they will help us.
But I'm pretty sure they're all friends up there.
Don't be ridiculous. Cold War is heating up again. Putin embarrassed Obama in Ukraine. Donald Trump said so in a, what is the word?
Beep.
A tweeter. We must prepare Singlezak for his journey in the centrifuge!
Don't put me in there! Socks never come back from there!
This is only way to establish adhesive electric polarity to make, what is words?
Beep beep!
Yes, static cling! Okay, let's go. Let's go.
Ah!
Take us to the interview!
Are we back? Okay. Here then is our second of our two-part interview with Richard Garriott. This time, Richard shares his ventures and adventures in space. Despite that challenge of trying to create a game that fit into multiple cultures, you did invent a couple new mechanics that you can use to this day. So that's
right, exactly. So despite the fact that it didn't last long, I think that it did make some important contributions to what the MMO genre can now do.
Sure. Now, while this was all going on, you had a little side project going on.
I did. Years ago, well, in fact, really going back to when I was a child, every kid I think dreams of one day going to space. Yeah. But with a father as an astronaut, my neighbors as astronauts, you sort of believe it's more possible than others might think. And since the beginning of my career, literally back living in my parents' house, as I started to make money, I've been investing in the privatization of space, hoping one day to be able to go myself. Right. It's not easy to go to space, so 30 years ago, there wasn't much you could do to help arrange that. But over the years, I've helped found and fund a number of companies, And then ultimately, just right with the turn of 2000, so right as we started with NCSoft, we built a company called Space Adventures, which now has taken 7 people on 8 flights to the International Space Station.
Yeah. So what does Space Adventures do itself in getting clients, if you will, to space?
Well, so when we first formed it, there was, you know, of course, NASA and Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, are in space. China wasn't yet. But we also had started something called the X Prize, which was to help bring into existence suborbital vehicles. But that, by the way, took us many years just to raise the prize money, much less for someone to win the prize. So those vehicles weren't coming into existence very quickly. But we noticed that Russia was already doing something that they called their guest cosmonaut program. And they were calling other countries they wanted to have relationships with, like Cuba or Korea or wherever it might be, and saying, hey, we will fly your first national astronaut who's not a professional career astronaut. They'll just come and train for one cycle and fly with us in exchange for some other political or financial exchange between their countries. And we said, that's mighty close to commercial availability. And so after that, Eric went to Russia and asked, he said, you know, can we do this and how much would it cost? And they said, well, the answer is no, because to find out how much it would cost us a lot of money. We'd have to go do a lot of research to find out what the fair market value is and how we would train average citizens. Right. Which we took as a qualified yes. We said, well, then how much would it cost you to find out if there's a yes or no answer? And the answer to that was $300,000. And since we predicted the price was going to be about $20 million, we said that's probably a good investment. And so I actually funded that myself. The Space Adventures didn't have that kind of money. So I funded this research project to find out the answer. The answer came back as a yes and $20 million. Sadly, at that time, that was also the internet stock market crash.
Right.
And so I couldn't, this whole thing that I had arranged really so I could go, and having recently sold Origin to Electronic Arts, so I was feeling wealthy a year previously, suddenly I no longer was wealthy. And so Dennis Tito became the first private citizen to fly. But going back now to our story where we were on Tabula Rasa, right. As NCSoft was doing very well, they had acquired Destination Games. I again was feeling reasonably wealthy, and so I had a long talk with T.J. Kim, the primary owner of NCSoft, and I said, look, I have to pick a time that is about 3 years from now. In 3 years from now, I want to take a vacation. And it's kind of an unusual vacation. It's kind of also an expensive vacation. So I'm going to need to, sell a chunk of stock, and I'm going to be gone for, 6 months. And what do you think of this crazy idea? And he was like, yeah, go for it. And so, we got Tabula Rasa out maybe a year ahead of the flight. But then right after we got the project out, I then had to fairly soon after start my training in Russia. Spent about 6 months in Russia training, and then made a little off-planet sojourn.
So in part you financed some of that trip by doing experiments for other companies. So you had a lot of tie-ins, both commercial as well as educational.
Yeah, and the educational stuff, of course, was worthwhile, but not economically. I mean, I was doing that as a volunteer.
That was just giving something back.
Yeah, but I did a lot of it. But also the commercial stuff was meant to not only offset the incredibly expensive price of access to space, but also hopefully to find businesses that I could grow that would ultimately pay, if not for my next trip to space, other people's trips to space. I'm foundationally a believer that, like if you think about the first government trips across from the old world to the new world, they started being funded by governments. That only changed when people found gold or certain food crops or other things in the new world that was worth it to have private expeditions to then bring that value back to the old world.
It was speculatively, viable.
Right, and so that switch from government exploration to private exploitation is natural and appropriate. And because if there was nothing of value in the new world, the governments should not keep spending money to go there. And if there is something of value, the government should also quit spending money to get there, because they should turn it over to private industry.
Right.
And so I think we're basically at that moment for low Earth orbit.
So everybody's creating these low Earth orbit craft, as well as getting ready to kind of send personnel again, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, and what I think is interesting about this full turn from government sponsorship to commercial as the norm, I think really goes back to the group of us that did the X Prize. I think that when we first set out and said we want to put up a $10 million prize for the first private vehicle to fly into space, it was literally had what we called the giggle factor. People went, oh, yeah, sure you are. And now that vehicle hangs in the Smithsonian, right in the main entryway. If there had not been an X Prize, I don't, people in government have talked about commercializing spaceflight for a long time. But it's very deeply entrenched as a jobs program, an aerospace jobs program, with how appropriations are done. Even though it is now going to save the government and us taxpayers, 10 times on the dollar, and therefore free NASA to go, use much more of its budget to go much farther, it still was very difficult to swing. And until we had some of those first commercial successes, I don't think people like SpaceX would have started. Right. I don't think, NASA has slowly turned towards commercial. The commercial stuff is now the assumed way it's going to go. Yeah. The old ways are falling away, and these new, much more efficient ways are finally emerging.
You're still pretty active in that. In fact, your wife Leticia is doing something interesting on her own. Yeah,
absolutely. So while really my participation in this space, other than as a participant flyer, is really as an investor. My wife might argue that I have earned my money in computer games and squandered it, in space travel, but interestingly, she has sort of joined the family business now on that side of the business. Where she just joined last week a company called Escape Dynamics. And what they're doing is trying to build what should become the next generation of rockets beyond what's being built today. And what I mean by that is that if for the last 50 years and all the way up and through, and including what SpaceX and Boeing and others are doing right now, are all chemical rockets. Right. And by definition, a chemical rocket is limited to the energy that you get out of the burning of the fuel and oxidizer, which the best one of those is hydrogen and oxygen. Yeah. And the using that to shoot molecules out the back to push the rocket out.
We've reached a point of diminishing returns with that technology.
Right. I think actually SpaceX is going to be the most efficient chemical rocket user, because they're not only efficient on the way up, but they're going to soft land their stages. So it'll be truly 100% reusable, which is going to drive the cost down from $100 million per astronaut down to below $1 million per astronaut. So it's enormous. SpaceX is doing phenomenally well. But after that, if you want to go another 10 times faster or 10 times more efficient, you need to do something called external propulsion. Instead of burning a fuel inside of it, you beam the power to the vehicle, to a receiver on the vehicle, and use that effectively unlimited power, as much power as you can manage to beam, to then accelerate particles out the back of it. And that
so there's still a fuel source.
There's still it's not even a fuel. It's really a reaction fluid
inside the vehicle.
Yeah. You have to still use Newtonians. In fact, you just use hydrogen, or you could use helium too. But lighter the better, because you can make it go faster out the back nozzle. But yeah, the payload fraction on a chemical rocket is only 3% or so. Right. With external propulsion, you can get up to maybe 30%. A much higher theoretical percentage. And that it's not an easy technology. It's one that's going to take 5 years plus to pull off. But if they manage to pull this off, it will again change the cost of access of space down by another order of magnitude. And so that begins to get it, even at $1 million per passenger that SpaceX is going to reach. The good news about that price is I earned $3 to $5 million with experiments on my flight. Right. So if I could sell $5 million of experiments and fly myself for $1 million, I'm going to do that a lot. So SpaceX is reaching this point where there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurial work happening in space because of what they're doing. If Letitia's company is successful at reducing it by another factor of 10, then you get the cost of access to orbit under $100,000. That actually becomes something where we have another company that takes people to go trekking in Antarctica. Well, that's a $25,000 to $50,000 a person trip right there. So if for the same order of magnitude, you could go live in space for a month, there's a lot of people that are going to choose space.
You think? You're also part of SpaceX. You've actually got some interest in SpaceX.
We do. Well, so because I've been investing in space since the beginning, I've invested in a number that have disappeared. Yeah. But the ones that have really hit and are holding with us are things like, well, it's not a company, but the X Prize obviously is a big success. Space Adventures continues to be a success. One of the suborbital rocket plane makers, X-Corps, as we have a piece of, and I think they're going to be one of the very strong, companies to take people on these suborbital space flights.
You're going whole hog here. You're actually going to send people around the moon.
That's right. You know, Space Adventures, we've already announced our next client to go to the space station. That's a woman named Sarah Brightman.
Okay.
She's already over there doing some training now. She's going to fly next summer. But we'd announced we were going to do this to find customers. We announced that we had arranged with Russia to do a circumlunar flight, a Apollo 8 style free return trip around the moon. We announced that 3 or 4 years ago, probably, that we had at least had a preliminary agreement with Russia to put that all together. But over those years, we've now tracked down 2 buyers. So while their names are not public, we now have people who have both put down sizable deposits, many millions of dollars in deposits, which now has then put Russia into work on finishing out the rest of the flight details.
Right.
And so in 3, 4, 5 years, maybe, that flight should be mounted, and humanity will get back to the moon the first time, non-governmentally.
Wow. Well, you have some property on the moon. You ever think you can go back and recover that Russian...
My Russian rover, Lunikod 2. It's funny about this because... And I go back and forth between describing this as tongue-in-cheek or serious, and it's actually a little bit of both. We actually, this Soviet lunar lander, Lunikod 2, it's on the moon, obviously. The batteries have died. It's just sitting there. Yeah. But it's actually still in use because it took some instruments that are these reflectors that observatories around the world use to bounce lasers off the moon to very precisely measure the distance to that spot on the moon and back, so they can see how the moon moves in and out from the Earth and how it wobbles a little bit and things of this nature. So it's still in use. And that's important for making claims. Like orbital slots, if you have a geosynchronous satellite, if you're the first person there, the UN recognizes that's your slot. So it doesn't even have to be on the surface of anything. And as long as you're in use, it's yours. Now, if your satellite falls out of use, then it's open and available for anybody else. And whoever goes there next then owns it until somebody else. Well, my lunar rover is still in use, and it has been since it got there. And so I think I can claim not only my rover, which nobody would doubt, I think I can claim the dirt directly underneath it, which I think most people would agree with. But I also think I can claim the 40 kilometers that my rover has tilled the soil with its wheels. The basis of that is that if you, for example, wash up on a desert island, you can't claim the whole island according to international convention. But if you build a farm and a little fence around your garden of a piece of that island, everyone agrees that that is yours because you're making use of it and you've modified it and you've enhanced it and improved it in some way. So based on that, I think my 40 kilometers, we've tilled the soil, it's been improved. There's marks, like they made a figure 8 thing that was for the International Women's Day that's still on the moon. It's an improvement. It's a place that is much more photogenic than other parts of the moon, or at least uniquely photogenic compared to other parts of the moon. So, we've modified the soil. And then, of course, we've also surveyed to the left and right with camera. So I actually think from, 6 feet off the ground where its cameras were, every piece of land that it could survey and name rocks and get your surveyor out, those also are part of my plot on the moon.
So essentially you have squatters' rights on the moon.
I think so. And at least I'm going to claim so. And how this has come up very recently as something that actually might be relevant is, versus just tongue-in-cheek, is there is a Google Lunar X Prize that is a $25 million prize that Google has sponsored through the X Prize organization for the first private vehicle to go back to the moon and rove around and send pictures back. And there's a bonus for taking a picture of sites where people have already put things on the moon. Well, as soon as that came up as an option, the United States weighed in and said, please don't go land near one of our sites. We don't want you to crash land into Apollo 11 until we know we can go there and put a fence around it or whatever the United States government might eventually want to do. And similarly, Russia has said, please don't go mess up our sites for similar reasons. Well, there only lives one site. That's ours. And so we actually have the only privately owned site. And so we've in talks with the X Prize folks, we said, well, look, tell the teams, if they go to my site, which I'm happy to welcome on, that if they trespass on my property, I will charge them $1 million. However, if they give me a photograph of my property, I will pay them $1 million. And that way we have commerce that has taken place on the moon. and trade that has existed. And since it'll be a private vehicle, they'll be able to claim their own spot that's outside of my spot, wherever they might land first. As long as they then rove over to my spot. And then we'll have 2 private claims on the moon that have actually had exchange with each other.
Now that's interesting. Be careful because, there's a lot of microsatellites going to be spewing all kinds of Arduino embedded microcontrollers by students and everything. If someone manages to get a camera on that and drop it on your site and take a picture and send it
That's
back.
all right. Then we'll exchange $1 million back in both ways.
You got people flying around the moon. You've got tourists taking suborbital hops. But I've also heard you've got people trying to pull off the Baumgartner stunt again.
Well, of course, I would actually say the Baumgartner stunt was an atmospheric jump. By definition of jumping out of a balloon, it is not a space jump. And so a lot of us who are into these rockets, and especially once we had suborbital rockets, we began to realize that a lot of these suborbital rockets take off vertically, and they hover for a while, and then they land vertically. And as soon as we saw that, we went, wow, this is a great jump platform. It goes up, it can stop at 10,000 feet, and you can just jump off as a parachutist. And why not? Once it's safe enough, that sounds like a blast, literally. Then we said, you can also then take it up to 25,000 feet and jump off with oxygen.
Right.
You could then take it to 50,000 feet and hover and jump off with a spacesuit. Then you could go up to 110,000 feet, wherever Baumgartner jumped from, and do a near space jump. But then you can go all the way up and go up to 50,000, 100 kilometers and do a space jump. And so the technology is now becoming available both in rockets as well as spacesuits. And so, there's a group of us that are now organizing a business structure, you might say, around how to get a series of test jumps flown and executed.
So here we have space starting out with patronage, as you mentioned, and going through entrepreneurial and privatization, and now we have people taking tours.
Yeah,
and that's amazing. It's amazing to see that happening in our lifetime.
I agree. There's a term I like called Orphans of Apollo, which is the name of a documentary about the attempt to privatize M.E.R. Before that was deorbited, and instead we've done this now with the ISS. And I like the description that I've sort of gone beyond their initial description, but the description of those of us of our age were inspired by the actual Apollo events to not only believe in the 2001 vision of the future, but also many of us were inspired to get into STEM-like careers. Right. And so I would actually argue that the technology boom that we saw just after Apollo was because of the STEM inspiration of Apollo. And so a lot of us who have had success in these STEM-like technological revolutions now look back at the movie 2001 going like, what happened to our wagon wheel space stations that we're all supposed to be living on? Why didn't they come into existence? And a lot of those people are turning back around now and saying, well, no time like the present. Let's try and do that. So you look at Elon Musk. First thing was PayPal, then Tesla, and space. You look at Jeff Bezos, Amazon, and space. I look at me, games and space, and Armadillo Aerospace, John Carmack, right. Doom Quake and space, and so this bug to go back and manifest the destiny that we all believed in the Apollo era, I think is a bug that many of our generation share.
Well, it's so amazing to see you being able to kind of integrate both those lives, both your passion for gaming and your passion for space. Thank you so much for taking time to hang out and talk with us. It's always a pleasure to see you, of course.
Likewise, of course. And love the show. Big fan already. Wish you great success as it grows, and thrilled to be here.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, we'll be releasing the hour-long version of our interview with Richard in about a week, so look for that on your favorite Galactic Inquiry channel. We work hard to bring the best Galactic Inquiry possible to you each week, so become a Patreon backer today and enjoy the benefits of supporting a show by and for the fans. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get a ping each time we publish a new video. And keep in touch through your favorite social portal. Links to Galactic Inquiry sites may be found on our website and in the YouTube description box below. This show belongs to you, the Star Citizen community, so be sure to give us your feedback on this thread. And, of course, the centerpiece of our show is fan creation. And if you have something cool to share, send it to us, and if it doesn't suck, we'll show it. And remember, we and the organization are listening.
That wasn't too bad. I guess I won't dislike it this week.